Hello, I'm Anna Rappaport. Welcome to the session on the Society of Actuaries Research at High Ages. The Aging and Retirement Strategic Research Program, this is an important part of their research. They're sponsoring it, and we're very proud to be able to present it. The presenters for this session are Sally Haas and myself. I'm Anna Rappaport, chair of the Aging and Retirement Steering Group. I was very involved in the research, and I'm a phased retiree and have been involved in all 7 living to 100s. And I'm going to ask Sally to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sally Haas, and it's an honor for me to both attend this conference and to be a speaker. Although I've been attending SOA events for more than 30 years, I am not one of you. I have none of those initials that appear after many of your names. But for almost 30 years, I was a retirement and life planning educator inside a major Fortune 500 company with 65,000 employees. Usually in seminar format, I guided individuals to envision their best future life, and through selected topics and speakers gave them the tools and motivation to move in the direction of that vision. The underpinnings of my work have always been based on positive psychology, or what makes the human heart sing. The SOA has traditionally been focused on the financial aspects of life. For my remarks today, I'm going to touch briefly on some financial topics, but I'm going to veer into matters that I consider to be more important. For my remarks, I'm going to be talking about leaving a legacy of love. And many of you have worked with Anna over the years. You know what a pioneer she has been in this field. I think we ought to award her the Courage Award for sharing this program with me and having me on the agenda. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Sally. And for those of you who want to learn more about the Aging and Retirement Strategic Research Program, there is a little summary on the front desk of some of the major accomplishments and what's going on since the program started nearly a year and a half ago. And I want to say that I'm so honored Sally is here, because Sally has been a major contributor to this work. She's really helped us with it a great deal. And she mentioned she's not an actuary. Well, one of the things that I've learned in the 20-some years of post-retirement risk research is that when we have people that are trained in different ways and know different things contribute to our work, it gets a lot better, because we all think about the same things in different ways, so it's really good. One of the other things about this 85 and over work is that as we've done it, occasionally Sally will say to me, oh, well, if I had known that when I was doing my planning, I might have done something differently, and that's always a wake-up call for me. So we're talking about 85 and over, and we think it's a really important subject because the numbers are growing, but also retirement success or failure frequently happens at older ages. That's when there's the biggest chance of needing long-term care, of running out of money, being alone. And more people need help. And while help isn't something that people think about when they're doing that retirement planning software at age 45 or 50, it's part of life. And there's relatively little research at those high ages. So we said more people. Between 2020 and 2050 in the U.S., we're projecting an increase from about 6.7 million to 18 million people over age 85, and a more than doubling in the percentage of the population from 2% to 4.5%. So there are big issues today, but there'll be bigger issues in the future. So we're going to start by talking about the research, how we did it and what we found, then about a few things about the future, because the question that comes up with this research is, okay, you looked at people 85 today, but are the people that are going to be 85 in 20 years, are they going to be the same or different? So we have a few comments about maybe they will, maybe they won't. Then Sally's going to talk about her experiences, and she's going to present to you in a very innovative way a collection of things that she's found out from being involved with a lot of people at that, a number of people at that age groups, and personal experience a number of us have found really illuminates what we find from the regular research, and we're going to end up with some strategies, tips, and next steps. So, the Post-Retirement Needs and Risks Committee, which is a part of Aging and Retirement, we've got about 20 years of work behind us now, multidisciplined, and we're trying to understand and improve post-retirement risk management. The latent life research, how did we get to 85? We didn't start at the beginning of the 20 years with 85 and over. We got there in 2017. Well, we did some focus groups in 2013 with recently retired retirees, and some of what they said made us think, is that going to work out well? So then we got to 15-year and over retirees, and we found a pretty consistent story, but a lot of issues. And then we said, well, we want to find out what happens as people keep going through retirement. That got us to 85 and over. And this work goes along with our risk survey series. So the latent life research consists of about 6 different components. It wasn't like there's one project, but the good news is there is one consolidated report that summarizes all these findings, and that report is part of a series of reports on the website that consolidate work from the 20 years by topics and issues. So that's a good thing to know it's there anyway. The preliminary phase was a conversation about latent life issues and identification of issues. We have a listserv with a committee with a lot of people on it, but and a variety of experts. And so it was a kind of conversation among experts, and then some preliminary interviews. Sally did interviews with people that were involved, that had families in assisted living. She had a family member in assisted living, and she was regularly in contact with the people. One of our other committee members did some interviews with people who were independent, and those preliminary findings were put into an article in the 2017 Pension Section News. Then, at that point, we had enough information to do a formal study. We hired Matthew Greenwald and Associates, and they did a series of in-depth interviews and a telephone survey and an online survey. The telephone survey of people age 85 and over, and the online survey of adult children of people that knew about parents. Then we had another online conversation, this one about cognitive decline, and we're going to share a little bit of it with you. It was fascinating and a lot of interesting information, and we actually ended up turning it into a report that's on the SOA website, and then the consolidated report of findings, and we integrated into this too some outside papers. So this was a big project on 85 and over, and as far as we know, it's basically unique. Our perspective in the SOAs, we've done this research. The SOA does research on a variety of different things with different perspectives. In a lot of cases, they're thinking about people that are working with pension plans or people that are working with insurance companies. But our perspective was primarily to focus on the individual, on the people who are the people in the pension plans, the users of the insurance. But a lot of this is from the lens of the individual in the household. So we use focus group surveys and experience reported by team members. And there's also a paper I did a couple of years ago on some personal experiences, improving retirement by integrating family, friends, housing, and support. Lessons learned from personal experience. And for people that are interested in more of this, I commend you. All of this is on the website. The Greenwald work, the study methodology, there were 62 in-depth interviews, and those were balanced between the U.S. and Canada. The people had to be 85 and over, but a third over 90, and they were a combination of just the person, or the person with an adult child, or sometimes just, which we call the dyad, or just the adult child. Now, we wanted people that had some concerns about running out of money, that need to be careful with their money. So we had an asset limit of $400,000 and no pension income over $2,500 a month. They were mixed by marital status, gender, housing arrangements. Then the surveys were, there was the telephone survey, and the surveys were just U.S. Telephone survey of 200 people 85 and over with assets under $400K. And of course, they had to be well enough to hear well enough to participate, cognitively well enough. So that telephone survey, those people are healthier than the population as a whole. And the online survey, those were people who had a parent 85 and over, and they had to know considerably more about them. And it turns out that that survey, the same economic issues, but those people were less healthy than the population as a whole. And that came out in the survey as well as the sampling technique. So we need to kind of remember that as we look at the results, that there are some differences in these samples. I would mention, too, that when we did, for example, the 15-year and over focus groups, you might say, well, of course you didn't get people that were sick or in long-term care. We were very aware of that. So we patched into that survey some interviews with children of people who were in long-term care. So we try in all of these things to be as careful as we can about these kinds of issues. So what were some of our major findings? In a lot of ways, the 85 and over people were consistent with what we had found before, but family became increasingly important as people's limitations increased. And for people that don't have family, there are challenges. There's relatively little planning, though, for those that have family. They say, well, I don't want my children to be bothered. But then when they have trouble, the children are there and help them. So if there's a gap in planning, and there's a lot of variation among this group in health, in their limitations, their social engagement. As the limitations increase, of course, they need changes to deal with the situation. In the very preliminary interviews, in those very preliminary interviews, the economic status was probably higher. We were quite sure about that. Those who were independent when they were reaching around age 85, there wasn't any particular change in financial management, although among those who had become widowed, there was a change because of that. But because of age alone, there wasn't particularly any change. But for the people in assisted living, they were getting extensive help, also with their financial management, and it was usually a family member that was helping them with bill paying and their financial management. They weren't going out and hiring financial advisors or professionals generally. Fraud is a significant concern, and that's showing up in a variety of ways. But the research from the SOA on what people are concerned about, the risks in retirement, fraud doesn't show up high. What we've also found, and through some of this other work, cognitive decline changes everything. And while some individuals will work to hide cognitive decline, Some are willing to plan for it, others no. Next, some more big picture findings. A lot of the retirees are very flexible and resilient. I see people taking pictures of the slides, by the way. They are available on the SOA website and will be available. The 85 and over population, the majority are female. Many are widowed. The people who are alone are more likely to need help. The individuals that don't have family available to help them face more challenges, and they'll need more money probably. They need to find support. This is an area for more research and work. It's very easy to identify the problems. It ain't easy to identify the solutions. Household spending declines on average when you get up to, as you go through the higher ages. And in the focus groups, in the interviews, people seemed frugal and quite comfortable with it. And I think we were really surprised with the earlier focus groups, the extent to which people were, well, I don't spend very much money, but I don't need much money. People seemed much more satisfied than I think some of us expected. The cost of a major long-term care event or assisted living is a major challenge. Most people don't plan for that expense, so it's a challenge and it hits them, but there's an awful lot of people that haven't planned for it. Insurance pays for most acute medical care, but very little relatively long-term care. Financial planning is often short-term and cash flow focused. And at the same time, the people are trying to hold on to their assets and adapt to uncertainty when it happens. So, your actuaries think about a plan and all of these things to do in advance. The people are, well, I'll deal with it when it happens. Shocks, except major long-term care, seemed less of a concern to the 85 and over than those at younger ages. And even though the healthcare systems are different, we found many similarities in the interviews between the U.S. and Canada. So I have just a very few quotes from these in-depth interviews, but what I want to tell you all is that the focus group reports and the in-depth interview reports have lots of quotes in them. And if you're giving presentations, if you're working, if you want to understand how people, but I really commend you to looking at some of these quotes. We think they're powerful. So to just show you the great contrast, the doctor told me, I want you to do me one favor. On the days you golf now, I only want you to walk the course. No walking before you golf. I used to walk an hour before I golfed, and then I would go out and walk 18 holes on top of it. Now, the other side of the fence, I had to buy a van to transport her back and forth to daycare because she could no longer sit herself in the car. I bought a used ambulance. That was strictly out of pocket. So one of the things we explored in the survey of the elderly was what kind of help do people get with regular activities? And these results are split between people who had assets of under $50,000 and assets of over $50,000. So the ones with the less assets needed a lot more help. 55% of them said they needed help being driven places. And remember, this is a healthier group than the population as a whole. About a little over a third support with taking care of their residence and shopping. Fewer, about a quarter with housekeeping. 11% only said they needed help with activities of daily living. Of the 50,000 and under, and of the over 50,000, 2%. Now, we also asked the adult children about the help their parents were getting. And this is different because we find out about help from the family, from friends, from paid help, and don't know and not available. The family was the biggest source of help with transportation and shopping. You'll see the percentages needing help in this sample are much higher. Management of medications and medical care, 44% were getting help from the family, 26% paid help, 30% said it's not applicable, which is not getting help. There was a lot of paid help for cleaning their residences and preparing meals. Over a third were getting paid help. So quite a bit of difference between the two samples, but lots of people getting help. And we've concluded, too, that the availability of family help really reduces the financial commitment needed, but it really creates a strain on the family members. And the other side of it is I know people that are helping their families, and there's a lot of people that are spending a lot of time doing that. Then we looked at spending across the retirement years, and this data is from an analysis done by EBRI, EBRI is the Employee Benefit Research Institute in the United States, using data from the Health and Retirement Study. That's a U.S. study, national longitudinal study of people at older ages. So, and this is federally funded. They go back to the same people every 2 years. So they have a much more complete picture from that. But if we look at this, and we have age 65 to 64 mean and median spending, 75 to 84 mean and median spending, and 85 and over. First of all, and this is household spending, and of course household size is decreasing a little bit, but spending for housing is the biggest item of expense by far, and it's decreasing with increasing age. And there's more spending at the high ends, and the means are quite a bit higher than the medians. Most of the elements of spending are decreasing with advancing age, some more rapidly than others, but healthcare, particularly the mean healthcare expenditure, is the exception, and it's going up with increasing age. I'd also point out to you that all of the retirement planning models, or an awful lot of the retirement planning models, and the way people think about retirement planning, you take your expenses about when you retire, what do you need to maintain your standard of living, you increase it with inflation. They don't reflect realistically at all the spending patterns that have been observed now in a number of studies. And what we found in the questionnaires and these data from the HRS is quite consistent with what we found. In the 85 and over survey, we asked people if they spent less than their income. And among the people with less than $50,000 of assets, so we're not talking about people with much money, so 47% said they spent a little less than their income, and 14% a lot less than their income. You get to the over $50,000 in assets, there was more people that were spending less than their income. And as far as I know, the same thing is true in other countries as well. People are trying to be frugal and hold on to their assets. Most adapt to their financial circumstances, and they're resilient. I'll just give you one quote. I get a pension, it's satisfactory. Mostly I can afford everything I need. I don't need that much because I live here with my children. I'm very satisfied with what I have. The cost of long-term care is a major challenge, but less so than in Canada. A quote from the U.S., "If I needed long-term care, I really don't know what I would do. I have wonderful children, and I know they would help me out if needed." We also know that there's relatively little planning done for long-term care, and people, they figure it out when it happens. They certainly didn't plan for it. This was an adult-child interview. I would just say it just happened. But the next slide gives us data that's somewhat of a surprise. Even older people with low asset levels tend to feel at least somewhat financially secure. People with less than $50,000 of assets, 85 and over, 27% said they felt very financially secure, 47% said somewhat secure, and So the majority are suddenly feeling pretty secure, and these are they're much higher numbers for those with over 50,000 of assets. One of the things that also came out in the interviews is that they weren't spending down these assets, and they felt relatively small amounts of assets were giving them a pretty good cushion, which, we figure out how much money people need, and it's like this, and people with this much money, they're like, oh, well, I'm okay. But of course, if they have long-term care event, they're not at all. Some of it's going to funeral expenses, and then whatever we have, we probably got $20,000 or $25,000. It's a little more than it was 5 years ago. It went up because she doesn't take money out. I think she has $20,000 invested that she doesn't really touch. So the pension stuff, she doesn't have $20,000 saved from that. She just makes that much from the pension, but she doesn't have that saved because she buys this and that, and she helps out with whatever around the house. That was a Canadian quote. Remember, those interviews were U.S. and Canada, and some of our research is U.S. and Canada, some is U.S. only. Now I'm to the question that I said we get all the time. Okay, so that's 85 and over people today. What about 20 years from now? We know from a demographic point of view there's going to be more of them. We also know that many fewer will have DB pensions, defined benefit pensions, and that will certainly make a difference to some of them. Values and relationships differ by generations. And one of the big questions is, will fewer be frugal than today? Today, some of the people we're talking about are influenced by the Depression when they grew up, when their parents grew up. So we don't know about things like the frugality, to what extent it's a cohort effect versus what changes by age. There's a lot of uncertainty about long-term care. There's certainly a caregiver shortage on the horizon. There are questions about how it will be funded and how it will be delivered and provided. Where will the setting be? There's financial pressure from the aging populations on government programs, employee benefits, and individuals. There's also uncertainty about health, medical care, and technology, and about Medicaid programs and whether Medicare might change. Technology also enables more communication and healthcare improvements, but there's uncertainty about how effective and costly it will be, also to what extent people will be able to use it. So at this point, if there are questions about the research or the methodology, I'll take 3 or 4 questions, and then we'll go on to Sally and talking about the personal experiences, and we'll take questions again at the end. So there are any questions about the research and the methodology? Please go to the microphone. We're being recorded, and we have to be on the microphones.
So just a quick question on the number of people. So it's relatively few. I think you said you had 200 interviews. Do you feel comfortable that that's representative enough? And how did you come up with 200 and not 100 and not 1,000?
Okay, we actually had, I think, 62 in-depth interviews and 200 in each of the surveys. In working with the research firm, first of all, none of this data has high levels of statistical credibility. But we have a lot of pieces that go together, and I think in terms of having enough for getting a good sense of what the issues are, and we now have so many different pieces that fit together well, I feel very comfortable about it. But if you were going to say to me, you said 45% of people need this kind of help, do you know if it's 38 versus 52? No, but I know it's an issue that they need this kind of help. And we also know in terms of it's very difficult to study this population, so we think what we've done is a pretty good compromise. Additional questions about the survey results or the methodology? Okay, well, I'm going to let Sally move on to sharing her experiences, and then we're going to come back and talk about cognitive decline and tips and have more questions.
So I've told you that for 30 years I was a life planning and retirement educator. I think when you've been in a career for a long time, it's not uncommon to kind of think back and ask yourself, with the benefit of hindsight, what did you get wrong, or what would you do differently? So here I am in my first remarks telling you what I got wrong in my career. I always told audiences that your retirement lifespan is likely to be divided up into three major categories. You're going to have your go-go years, your slow-go years, and then possibly your no-go years. But what had been changing was that our midlife, the time where we're in our go-go and slow-go, was elongating. But the time of our no-go years was relatively compressed and fairly short. That was a trend that I thought was true, but as we moved into this century, I got to see that more people were living longer in the no-go years. And in my seminars that I was teaching, I really didn't spend much time talking about how to plan for the no-go years, and also how to plan for the no-go years of your family and your loved ones. I have been a participant in the SOA post-retirement risk research, and what I can tell you is I've participated in a number of different research groups over the years. This group distinguishes itself by the enthusiasm and the passion that the committee members have. They all have stories and experiences that they want to share, and in our conference calls we always run over and there's always more to talk about, so it's been a fun group to participate in. I don't consider myself to be an expert on elder care. I have been the caregiver for my two parents. Both of them lived to be age 96. And I have been the executor multiple times for a number of family members. And I think I felt pretty well equipped to be the caregiver for my parents because of my background in benefits. I knew benefit terminology, pension, finance, and I just felt like I could do a good job of this. I also was very determined to do a flawless job because in 1962, when my maternal grandmother died, there were issues over the estate. And those issues hung like a dark cloud over my family, and we never knew those cousins, that aunt and uncle on that side of the family. So going into my role as caregiver, I was going to do this in a flawless way. Well, that didn't quite happen, but at least that was my intent. So I was a personal witness to generational strife, conflict, unexpected challenges in response to the stresses that elder care can have on family and individuals. Over the time that I spent with elder care with my parents, which turned out to be about 8 years, I spent every week, virtually for 8 years, with multiple meals in assisted living facilities with people that were over the age of 90. And it was really a pleasure, even though you had to talk very loud, to find out what were their issues, what were their concerns, what was a good day like for them. And I'll tell you, I really learned a lot from those people and had tremendous respect for them. In my time in working with my folks, I came into contact with a lot of adult children dealing with elder care issues, and I feel truly blessed for my circumstances because in my case, there were 3 other siblings in my family. I had one who was helpful. My folks had some resources, and they had most of their marbles to the very end. So I truly was blessed in what I had to deal with. So now what I've done is I'm going to share with you a fictitious family that I have invented that I think is going to point out some of the challenges that we might run into. And in telling you this story, you can see that I have a devious and deviant mind in who I've invented here. Anyway, so I'd like to introduce to you the Thompsons. And I know that in terms of memory, you're likely to remember a story easier than you are facts and data. So I hope some of this you'll be able to relate to. So in this case, we have the Thompsons. Morty was born in 1932. He's a retired city accountant. His wife, Catherine, was born in 1936. She's a retired school teacher. They were married in 1956. They live in their longtime residence in Fresno, and they have a 25-acre vineyard. Incidentally, Anna has checked all of my math on the Thompsons, so if there's any errors, we can point to Anna on this. Anyway, their son Martin was born in 1958. He lives in Dallas. He's an actuary. He's had a really great career. Anyway, he's married. He's had 2 children, and Dallas is about 1,600 miles from Fresno. Their daughter Kate was born in 1960. She lives in Fresno. She's a school administrator and married and has 2 children. Just a couple of things here. Okay, now I guess we'll move to scene 1. Happens in the year 2000, and both Morty and Catherine are planning for their future. Morty's 68, Catherine's 65. They have their wills, powers of attorney, healthcare directives, all in place, but they're now focused on a few key questions. Where are they going to age? How are they going to divide their assets from between their children and grandchildren? And what are they going to do with this vineyard? They do decide to buy long-term care insurance. They have 3 years coverage for each of them. They wish that they had purchased it at younger ages. They appoint Kate as their executor, and they decide that if they really focus on their own health, that maybe they can elongate their health span and minimize the potential that they'll be dependent at later ages. So they get comprehensive health checkups, they join the gym and a biking group, and they really use their extra time that they have in retirement to improve their health. They decide to age in place, they modify their home, make certain improvements, and then they sit down and have a family meeting with their children. Just a couple of observations here. People oftentimes will put in place their estate plan, their will, and their documents, and they think they're done, and they never go back and take a look at those documents. The other thing that happens, oftentimes if there is a family meeting, and that doesn't necessarily happen all the time, oftentimes there's already issues on the table between the siblings. In this case, we learn that Martin's not happy that Kate's kids have a college fund and closer relationship with the grandparents than his do. But this is not discussed at the family meeting. But it is creating some tension. But our observation is that it's not uncommon for children and grandchildren to be treated unequally, causing resentment. Scene 2. It's now 2012. There's overwhelming challenges. Morty is 80, Catherine is losing the battle with breast cancer at age 77. These are huge challenges for Morty finding support for Catherine, and Catherine wants to die in the home. They bring in a hospital bed, they modify the home, and they start to source caregivers. Initially, it's 12 hours per day, just half time, 7 days per week. But then they have to ramp that up to 24 hours per day. That's 6 to 7 caregivers. Morty really wants to honor Catherine's desire to die in the home. This is her wish. I can see the long faces in what I'm doing to all of you, but I'm not sure I can promise a happy ending, but perhaps some solutions here. Anyway, Morty manages the caregiver and learns how to administer the hospice drugs. He's got help from his children. Martin's wife, who lives in Dallas, takes over the medical and insurance-related claims and handles all of that. Kate becomes the healthcare and service coordinator and does the shopping for them. Morty files a long-term care claim, and it's initially denied. And Morty, during this time, reads On Being Mortal by Atal Gawande, and that was one of the things that Morty did, and he found that very helpful for this time. So an observation is, normally when there's a health event, you are likely to have a lot more people in and out of your home at all hours of the day and night. This should be anticipated in terms of maybe a safe or getting valuables stored elsewhere or distributed, so you don't have to think about that with all of the different people in and out of the home. The other observation is providing care and helping someone die at home can be a lot more difficult than people expect. Okay, scene 2.5, it's 2014. Morty is regrouping and rethinking. He's widowed now at age 82, and Morty starts to question his previous decisions and ask, were the challenges he went through with Catherine necessary? How can he make it easier for his loved ones? And what's the best way to exit? So what he decides, he's appointed Martin as his power of attorney, and they agree on a signal or method to tell when Martin should step in. Now, Morty has always done his own tax filing, and so they agree that this one of the signals they're going to have between the two of them is that Martin is going to come every March 30 and check the tax return, and that Morty has done this. The other thing is, with the vineyard in October, they always go, even though the vineyard is leased, they always do the accounting for the vineyard, or Morty does, in October, and they also tap a few of those barrels of wine. So they agree that their signal is they're going to check the tax return and they're going to also check the accounting for the vineyard. This is a way to determine if anything is falling between the cracks. Now, yes, things can fall between the cracks in June or July, but at least they've got 2 checkpoints that they've agreed on to determine if it's time for Martin to step in. Morty also investigates assisted living and hospice options for the future. He puts together a binder with his financial information and documents for both Kate and for Martin. Now you can say, well, what about having all this on the computer? He has it all on the computer, but he's not sure people are going to be able to access his computer should there be a sudden event because of passwords. So he's made hard copies. Plus, he wants them to have that with them, perhaps the healthcare directives and those things, the durable powers of attorney in their cars. He's even put them in sheet protectors. Okay, so Morty holds his family meeting to discuss his revised plans and review documents and give both Kate and Martin information. Okay. I'm sorry about this, but it's scene 3, and there's a new direction for Morty. Morty meets Rosa, age 71, and marries her. Rosa is a retired caregiver with daughters age 32 and 34. They meet at church, their Catholic church, and they were both active in the church. Morty immediately faces a conflict and tries to keep peace while offering some lifetime security for Rosa. So he's really challenged. How does he take care of his kids, not get the family upset, but he also wants to provide some security for Rosa. So Rosa's house is left in her name and estate. Morty puts in writing that Rosa has permission to stay in his home until her death. The ownership of Morty's home and vineyard remains in the trust, and the value is left 100% to Martin and Kate. Rosa does get a share of Morty's assets, and rental income from Rosa's house and other incomes are invested in joint assets. Morty holds a meeting with Martin and Kate. They accept his decision, but they're not really happy. So the observation here is that frequently there is family conflict, especially with blended families, and Morty's children are no acceptance. Balancing these interests is not easy, but this may be a time to get the advice of a financial or estate planner. Okay, there's only a couple more scenes here. Scene 4, it's 2018. Morty's age 86, and Rosa, at age 74, suffers a major stroke. Now, we thought Rosa was going to be Morty's caregiver, but nope. So Morty's grappling with how to honor Rosa's health care directive and her stated wishes and her religious values. Despite strong objections from her daughters, Morty knows that he's the one that's got to make the decisions. So Morty develops what he calls his moral compass and asks, what did Rosa want? What did Rosa tell me she would want to do? Because they discuss this. If the roles were reversed, what would he want? And then what is the medical establishment or the physicians telling Morty that he should do? And then the opinions of others are way, way down on the list. So this is Morty's moral compass. So after 6 days, Morty authorizes cessation of life-saving measures. Our observation is that it's a common challenge to deal with different opinions in a family and over ending of life or these kinds of issues. Oftentimes, people are coming with different opinions. So this is certainly a difficult challenge. Okay, scene 5, it's 2020. And Morty is making decisions based on his experience. Morty's age 88. He's been widowed twice, and he's in his hospice room. Morty realized that he is fortunate to have some marbles left, some assets left, and some warning that of the likely timing for his exit. During the last 24 months, he has made a lot of changes to leave a legacy of love. He's patched up the relationships with Rosa's daughters and a few others that he needed to patch up relationships with. He's revisited and clarified his health care directive, and he's actually made a verbal recording of his health care wishes because he knows how difficult this could be, and he wants Morty and Kate to be able to rely on his actual words so that they'll have confidence to do what he wants done. He gave this information and the recording to Martin and Kate. He revisited his estate plan and left additional money to Kate in recognition of the time and effort she spent in elder care support over the years. And he got Martin's to be on board with this. Martin gave the yes that he was fine, that his sister got some additional money. He made charitable gifts and thank you donations and embraced Swedish death cleaning and downsized and distributed almost everything. He chose this hospice house as the place to die because he knew that they provided good care and support for fragile loved ones. And he celebrated and enjoyed his last days. So, epilogue, Morty was at the hospice house for a little more than 3 weeks. His loved ones came and went, but since staff was there, they did not need to stay constantly. Morty was lucid and peaceful to the end and took comfort in his religious beliefs and in the visits from family and friends. Marty told his family that he had done his best to leave everything in good order for them. And even though this journey was about leaving a legacy of love, it was really about living a legacy of love. So good job, Morty. So our observation is that if we think about all of the issues that I've covered in my fictitious family, we need to think about the individual, in that case ourselves, the family, and the caregivers.
So one thing that I want to tell you is that as we've done this work, each one of us on the committee that has been involved in some of these projects, as we go through various things with family members, we bring personal experiences, and it's like, oh, did they think about this? Did they think about that? So personal experiences are very powerful in this. I want to share with you just briefly a little bit from our conversation on cognitive decline and tell you that this kind of started as an online conversation that we didn't really expect to be a big deal, but it became gripping. And it just mushroomed, it grew, it exploded. Cognitive decline changes everything. It makes fraud easier and more likely. Fraud and financial exploitation can come in many forms. It's unclear how big a concern, though, this is among seniors. Our risk survey shows that it's down the list on what they're concerned about. Well, who causes these problems? Strangers, caregivers, and family members. So it's not like, oh, well, this person is a family member. It's safe. It's like you don't know. And financial services companies have a variety of roles that they can play in helping. Now, I'm just going to share a few quotes. This is quite a long report. I really commend this report to you because it's very gripping. I'll share a couple of quotes from it, and hopefully you'll want to go and look at it. It's pretty lengthy, and it's arranged by subject. I was the one who compiled the conversation into it. And what we've done is we've removed all the personal information and gotten the consent of all the people who participated before publishing it. So we want you to know we haven't violated anybody's privacy, but at the same time we've tried to bring you their own issues. Given my own experience and dozens of calls from readers, I laugh when I see the usual advice around cognitive decline and preparation. It seems to be focused around products like index funds and annuities, and the expectation that the individuals have financial advisors. Most people are do-it-yourselfers, as were my parents. So there's no advisor, and they may be CDs spread across many, many banks. Further, widows do not know what their husbands have set up. Many have called me crying, and I've seen advisors take advantages of them. Next quote, when it became unsafe for my mother to continue driving, she resisted our pleas, and we asked her doctor to intervene. The doctor asked her if she thought she should be driving. She said she was fine, and he said, okay. It was clear to the doctor that she was having short-term memory issues, but he did not want to be involved. We had a number of people who reinforced that kind of thing. My mother-in-law refuses to have this discussion, even with her cognitive skills in decline. The solutions are many-faceted, And we are actually working on more projects that will, we hope, help with this. For individuals, planning ahead is a really good idea, but many people don't want to do it. Now, the legal documents are really important, and we are not lawyers. But what we want to tell you about those legal documents is they're the first step. They're not, I did the legal documents, I'm done. It's important to involve family or supportive people, but you need to be careful because they could be trouble too. And to give appropriate instructions to caregivers and helpers and reduce the potential for conflict. There are frequently situations where you can simplify regular money management. You can monitor bill paying, mail management, and financial statements. And Sally in her story mentioned the signals about when it's time to change money management. Our conversation pointed to people with not just they couldn't do their tax returns to those books, they weren't opening their mail, they weren't paying their bills. When they turned the electricity off because the bill wasn't paid, that's a signal that there's a problem. Consider financial products, long-term care insurance, annuities, investments that don't require decisions. And people should be getting appropriate help rather than trying to go it alone. For financial organizations, they can screen transactions, watch for problems in dealing with clients. They set up what they call in case of emergency procedures, which provides for if the advisor or if a teller or if somebody sees a situation where they think there's a problem, they have someone that they can call to find out what's going on. There's also the authorities, Adult Protective Services. So we have a lot more comments in the conversation. Setting up as many bills as possible to be paid directly from the checking account can cut down on the need to write checks. I do this for things that don't change from month to month, like health insurance premiums or payment, cable, cell phone. In terms of solutions, a good friend of mine has created an elderly fraud detection technology solution that monitors bank accounts and related financial information for suspicious activity and sends notices and updates to designated parties. So the idea of this conversation, I think, is really good, and the idea of looking at some of these ideas is really important. We want to move now on to strategies and tips, and I'm going to turn on the other microphone so we can be a little bit interactive for this. Okay, so Sally, you want to start on the next slide?
Okay, so we have some strategies and tips and on some things that are sometimes forgotten. So in your 40s and 50s, I think this is a time as part of your regular retirement planning and your investment in your 401k to start thinking about your investment in your Plan B. And your Plan B is what you are going to do if you need to generate income longer or later in life. And that could be maybe you can go gradually into retirement with current employer, current job. Don't know. But maybe you're going to get some rental property and rent that out. Maybe you're going to do what Anna's been doing. You know, Anna's does these fabulous sketches, and she's now selling those for thousands of dollars. Anyway, you're going to take a hobby and maybe turn that into some additional income.
No, Anna's not selling art, but she is sketching.
Anyway, but seriously, start thinking about your Plan B and what you're going to do to generate income longer. And then in your 40s and 50s, I think this is also a time to really think about how your loved ones might affect your own retirement plans. I know that people have very different relationships with their loved ones, and anyway, and they define those in unique ways, and some of us have a real sense of obligation, others not so much. But I think giving some careful thought to this, I also feel very strongly that what your loved ones have done in terms of their estate planning, it's sensitive to ask for discussions around that, but it is your business if it's going to affect you and you need to step in. So this is really a time to understand what your loved ones have done around estate planning. Oftentimes people also have people in the family that have disabilities, and that could be young grandchildren that maybe have some disability, and maybe this is a time to give some more thought to their care and needs. And then shortly after retirement, and it's not that our financial planning hasn't been in place all along, but this is a time to start simplifying and to get more serious about our own life planning, especially from a geography standpoint. I always had an exercise for people that were over 50 in my retirement seminars. They'd come in and I'd say, I'm sorry, but I have some bad news for you this morning. You're 2 years into retirement, and so it's not 2 years from now, but you're 2 years into retirement and something's happened and you have to move away from your existing home. Where are you going to move and why? And so they had to write down where they were moving and why. And it was so interesting always because oftentimes spouses were moving to 2 different states or anyway. But so I would have them write this down, and then we'd have a discussion about why they were moving there. Then I'd have the same exercise and I'd say, you're age 90. Where are you moving and why? What your needs are and what you're thinking about at 65 is vastly different from what you're thinking about at age 90. At age 90, you're thinking about being close to public transportation, crime, healthcare, and being close to family. So thinking through that whole continuum of life is an important thing to do as you're doing your own life planning. And then be prepared when unexpected health event occurs. You need to have your support structure in place with all the documents and papers in their cars in protected sheet covers so that they've got them and can be right there prepared to talk with the medical personnel. You need a plan for your care, and you need your own signal on when you know it's time to start transitioning some of the financial management. You also need to think about payment of extra costs. Both my folks had long-term care. When my mom was released from the hospital to go to hospice, in this case a nursing home, the first month at the nursing home was $18,000. Her long-term care paid $2,000. So just having, what can I say, a plan for when the unexpected happens so that you're not having to scramble is an important step to take.
We have put together a variety of tips. Many of these tips are in that consolidated report I mentioned. I'll just touch on a few of them, but there are a variety of constituencies. For retirees and their advisors, be sure you get those legal documents in place and that you have a way to update them. Big issue, Society of Actuaries research shows people are not thinking longer term. Think longer term and don't forget about long-term care planning. Society of Actuaries research shows people are aware but not planning for long-term care. Remember, married couples often become singles, and that a plan needs to work for the couple as a couple, but for each of them separately. And I've said that in a conversation I had with a pretty high-level person who was right away, oh my God, hadn't thought about that. Remember the role of family, how important they are, and include that in planning, but be careful too how you do it. And households without family, they also are going to need help. Our research shows that many people don't have an emergency fund, so don't forget about that. You got to assess housing needs. Will they change? What do you need to do to fix housing? Be careful about charitable gifts and contributions and transfers to family. As people age, they tend to get hit up for more of those, and that's a form of, at times, exploitation. And sometimes they'll keep making the same things over and over. Be sure that people have current IDs. If they don't drive, they may not renew their driver's license. They still need a current ID. Be careful about things like trust administration. For individuals helping seniors, the forgotten caregivers, learn about the philosophy and choices of the person you're helping, because you may be helping them when they can't communicate their wishes. Figure out who can help you and set things up and get organized. Spend time taking care of yourself. Don't forget about yourself. And don't be afraid to get additional help, and hopefully there's financing for it. Make sure there's the legal documentation and that you have access to it. Understand, too, what kind of resources you can use in the community. Working with the person you're caring for, understand who you can communicate to. If there are a number of children, the parents may be like, well, communicate to the children, but don't communicate to this one, or you can communicate this much, but not more. Be prepared for cognitive decline and have set up those signals. And try to take steps that will avoid conflict. For financial services companies, establish procedures for dealing with cognitive decline. Automated screening of transactions to look for funny patterns is one. People dealing with individuals may set up this the companies set up this in case of emergency procedures, and there's now some FINRA guidance about that. There's some legal requirements. There are times when you may bring in the authorities. You can also develop products and supportive services like bill-paying services, annuities and advanced life-deferred annuities, long-term care products, and simplified investment management. For more information, you can contact the SOA. And I just have some next steps. Looking to the future, first of all, this is a done project, but we're not done. We're never done. We're always building. We have 2 current projects to improve resources for late in life periods. We're working on a decision guide jointly with Financial Finesse on high age decisions. We've produced 11 decision guides for around the time of retirement. We found there are a lot of different issues at high ages. We're very excited about this. And we're also working on it with the people from Minnesota and the Stanford Center on Longevity, a conversation guide linking to helping people around retirement age plan for future long-term cognitive decline and the need for help. So both of those are very exciting projects, and they're underway. We have some possible topics for future research, and they'll keep cropping up, and we'd start some new projects usually every year. Retirement ages and working in retirement, that's a really big, and we have a project right now that may do something on that. Future trends in longevity and periods of healthy versus unhealthy aging. People aging alone, we know there's huge issues around that. Financial security as the world uses more defined contribution plans. Long-term care delivery and financing. The impact of technology, housing options, disruptions, and integration with care. So that's a little bit of a glimpse into some of what we've been doing on the 85 and over, and we have some references in the back of the deck, and the deck is on the SOA website, and all the SOA reports we've mentioned are up. We have time, I think, for just a few questions, so we'll take...
It was a great presentation. For those individuals who don't have access to really family who can help them making financial decisions, I just find it a major problem that the financial advisory community is just pretty much focused on clients where they can sell products and also manage assets. And when somebody goes to them and doesn't want one of those two services, they can't get good advice. What's the solution?
Well, the solution may be, if there's a close friend, there may be a relative other than children that can help them. There are elder care case managers. There may be social workers. And they're probably talking about people that don't have very much money. So the issue isn't having a lot of expertise in investment management. It's having expertise with life decisions. There are some bill-paying services out there that we don't really know much about them, and we might do more research, but we've discovered in the case of a couple of the projects we worked on, there's an association of daily money managers, and we've also heard from some financial advisors about using some people like that. So that you asked the question of what's the answer, and we've put that on our areas for future research to try to learn more about that, but it's a great question.
Sometimes accounting firms are also a source for help or can direct you somewhere.
Oh, and depending too on there's community services for people that don't have very much money. Area agencies on aging are a place where people can also go and ask the question, where can I get help with this? They may or may not be able to find it. In Chicago, there was an elder law clinic for a long time, but unfortunately it's not there anymore now. But that elder law clinic helped. If you went in there without money, they helped you. If you went in there with money, they helped you find a source. And that was connected to one of the law schools. We've got another question, comment?
Yeah, Les Lohan, what a bag of hot potatoes. And I think I'm not the only person in this room who rents cars. And in the earlier session, I talked about taking away people's rights to make their own decisions. And I've noticed, well, first of all, most of my family and friends tell me I shouldn't drive. They think that blind old people should stay off the roads, but this is Florida.
Ah.
I'm now a typical Florida driver. But, you know, a lot of the car rental companies, I rent cars a lot, and they've got that little thing, age 25 to 70. I don't like it. So thank you very much. I guess that's the bottom line of my comment.
So do we have any additional questions?
Anna, I do want to close with a quote, so when we're all
You can
done.
close with a quote, and then Renora is going to be very happy for me to tell you that they have at 5:30, there's a receptionist poolside. So Sally, let's do your closing statement, and I'll do my closing statement.
All right, since I probably got some negative points with you on the Catherine and Morty story, I wanted to close with something uplifting. So this is a quote by Edith Wharton. I call it Formula for Happiness. See, I'm consistent. I'm on this happiness theme. In spite of illness, in spite even of the arch enemy's sorrow, one can remain alive long past the usual date of disintegration if one is unafraid of change, insatiable in intellectual curiosity, interested in big things, and happy in small ways. Thank you. On behalf of Anna and I, you've been a great audience. Thanks.
And I want to close by saying that I've seen people with limitations who do very poorly, and people with a lot of limitations who find the way to continue getting good things out of life. I think it's really important to think about what you can do to get the most you can out of life with whatever limitations you have. Thank you all, and thank you for supporting the aging and retirement research.
Anyone who has an enrolled actuary credit form, I'll take those. Thank you.